I went on a blind date and realized too late that it was my boss's wife. Okay, so let me start by saying I'm not exactly the blind date type. I'm 29, work in a mid-level management role at a marketing firm, and my social life revolves mostly around my two roommates, fantasy football, and occasional happy hours. But a few weeks ago, my buddy Greg decided he'd had enough of my single guy routine and said, "Dude, I know this amazing woman, smart, funny, recently separated. You'll love her." I wasn't exactly thrilled, but Greg wouldn't shut up about it. He even went as far as texting me her number and saying, "Just ask her out. Coffee, dinner, whatever." After a few days of hesitation and a couple of lonely Friday nights, I gave in and texted her. Her name was Emily. She was super friendly over text, and we agreed to meet at this upscale bar downtown on a Thursday night. Low stakes, neutral ground. The day of the date, I was slammed at work. My boss, Richard, middle-aged, authoritative, and perpetually stressed out, was in rare form. He had us in back-to-back meetings all afternoon. I remember distinctly him saying, "No distractions tonight, everyone. Big presentation tomorrow morning." By the time I left the office, I was tired but determined to make it to the date. I figured, worst case, I'd have one drink, make polite conversation, and call it a night. Spoiler alert. It did not go as planned, so I get to the bar about 10 minutes late. Classic me. Traffic was a mess, and honestly, I spent the entire drive debating whether or not to just turn around and cancel. But when I walked in, I spotted Emily right away. She was sitting at a corner table, glass of wine in hand, scrolling through her phone, and let me tell you, she was stunning. Shoulder-length dark hair, confident posture, and a kind of presence that immediately made me regret not ironing my shirt better. I walked over, and she stood up to shake my hand. Firm handshake, warm smile, the kind of smile that puts you at ease right away. "Alex," she said, tilting her head slightly. "Nice to meet you." We sat down, ordered drinks, old-fashioned for me, another glass of red for her, and started chatting. And honestly, the conversation was flowing. She was funny, sharp-witted, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We covered the usual blind date checklist: hobbies, favorite movies, mild trash talk about dating apps. Turns out she's into hiking and had just started getting into baking during the pandemic. I, of course, had to tell her about the time I accidentally set a frozen pizza on fire. About 30 minutes in, she asked where I worked. "Marketing firm downtown," I said casually. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh? Which one?" I told her the name of the company, and for just a second, just a split second, I saw something flicker across her face. But then she smiled again and said, "Small world. Do you like it there?" I didn't think much of it at the time. The drinks kept coming, the conversation kept flowing, and honestly, I was starting to think this date was actually going really well. But then her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen, and her smile faltered, just a little. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah," she said quickly, flipping the phone face down. "Just work stuff." And that's when I started feeling a little knot in my stomach. Something felt off, but I didn't know just how off things were about to get. All right, so at this point, I'm still blissfully unaware of the absolute landmine I'm tiptoeing across. Emily and I are laughing, the drinks are flowing, and for a brief moment, I'm thinking, wow, maybe Greg actually pulled off a miracle here. But then, Emily casually asks, "So, do you work directly with Richard?" And something about the way she said his name made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Yeah," I replied cautiously. "He's my boss. I report to him pretty regularly." She nods slowly, her wine glass halfway to her lips. "And do you like him?" Now, let me clarify. Richard isn't terrible, but he's also not exactly the guy you describe as warm and fuzzy. So I went with diplomacy. "He's intense," I said with a little chuckle. "But he gets results, you know?" Emily smiled at that, but it was tight, forced, like she was holding something back. Then she leaned back in her chair, took a deep breath, and said, "Alex, I need to tell you something." And that's when my stomach plummeted. Her tone was too serious, too heavy for a blind date. She glanced around the bar like she was checking for someone, and then she lowered her voice. "I'm married to Richard." Now, I wish I could tell you I had some suave, cool guy response ready, But no. My brain completely short-circuited. You're, what? I stammered, married. Technically separated. But yeah, Richard is my husband. At that exact moment, I swear I heard the record scratch sound effect in my head. My drink suddenly tasted like pure regret. Wait, does he know you're here? Like, on a date? With me? Emily sighed and shook her head. No, he doesn't know. My fight-or-flight response was kicking in hard, and every instinct in my body was telling me to just stand up, throw some cash on the table, and sprint out the door. But I didn't, because Emily had more to say, so there I am, sitting across from my boss's wife, trying not to choke on my old-fashioned while she calmly explains that yes, she's technically still married to Richard and no, he has absolutely no idea she's out on a date, let alone with me. At this point, my brain is doing Olympic level gymnastics trying to figure out the appropriate response. Do I get up and leave? Do I ask follow-up questions? Do I just faint? Emily must have noticed the panic on my face because she reached across the table and said, Alex, please, just let me explain. I nodded, mostly because I couldn't trust myself to speak without squeaking like a rusty hinge. She sighed, swirling her wine glass. Richard and I have been separated for almost 6 months. He won't sign the divorce papers. Every conversation turns into a fight, and honestly, I don't even know why he's holding on. We're done. Completely done. Okay, fair. That actually made me feel slightly less like I was about to spontaneously combust. But still, there was one glaring issue here. Emily, why didn't you tell me before we met up? I asked, trying to keep my voice low. She looked genuinely guilty. I wanted to. I really did. But every time I tried to bring it up over text, I chickened out. And then, I guess I was hoping you'd just be a random guy, someone totally disconnected from my past life. Well, joke's on both of us, because here we are, 2 drinks in, tangled in a web of marital drama, and I'm sweating like I just ran a marathon in a suit. At this point, the bartender swung by and asked if we wanted another round. I started to decline, but Emily said, yes. Another round, please. So, drinks were refilled, and I sat there, trying to process. Part of me felt bad for her. She genuinely seemed stuck in a mess she didn't know how to get out of. But another part of me was screaming, dude, run. And then Emily dropped another bombshell. Richard thinks I'm out with a friend tonight. If he ever found out about this, it wouldn't end well. For either of us. The room felt 10 degrees hotter. I could already imagine the awkward Monday morning at the office, Richard glaring daggers at me in the conference room. But before I could respond, something caught Emily's eye over my shoulder. Her face went pale. She leaned forward, her voice a harsh whisper. Alex, don't turn around. But Richard just walked into the bar. Cue actual panic mode. All right, so picture this. I'm frozen in place, clutching my glass like it's a life preserver, while Emily stares past me with the wide-eyed look of someone who just spotted a great white shark in shallow water. Richard's here? I whisper-yelled, already feeling sweat pooling in places sweat shouldn't pool. Emily gave the tiniest nod. He hasn't seen us yet. He's at the bar. I had 2 options. Stay completely still, like a deer in headlights, and hope Richard doesn't notice me. Dive out the window and start a new life in another state. Unfortunately, neither option felt particularly promising. Okay, I said under my breath. Maybe he's just here for a drink. Maybe he won't. Emily? Richard's voice cut through the air like a guillotine blade. I turned around so slowly, I might as well have been on a rotating platform at a car show. And yep, there he was, my boss, Richard. He was wearing one of his usual overly expensive suits, his tie slightly loosened, and an expression that said, "What the actual hell is going on here?" Richard. Hi, Emily said, her voice a little too high-pitched to sound casual. Richard's eyes flicked between the two of us. Alex? What are you doing here? Now, in moments of crisis, some people are cool under pressure. They have quick wit and calm charm. I am not one of those people. Hey Richard. Wow, small world. Huh? Crazy running into you here. Just grabbing a drink. With a friend? Emily winced. Richard's expression darkened. A friend? He repeated, his voice dripping with suspicion. There was a very long silence. The kind of silence where you can actually hear your own pulse in your ears. Finally, Emily spoke up. Richard, we need to talk. Not here. Not now. But soon. Richard stared at her for a long moment before turning his icy gaze back to me. Alex, I expect to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. And with that, he turned and walked out of the bar, leaving behind the most awkward silence I have ever experienced in my life. I turned back to Emily, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, that could have gone better. She sighed, rubbing her temples. You think? At this point, I wasn't even sure if I was still breathing. All I knew was that tomorrow morning was going to be hell. But Emily wasn't done yet. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, Alex, there's something else you need to know before tomorrow. So there we were, Emily staring at me like she was about to confess to a crime. Me gripping my glass so tightly I was surprised it hadn't shattered. Richard had left the bar, but his presence still lingered like a ghost at the table. Alex, Emily started, her voice low and serious. You need to know something before you walk into that office tomorrow? I nodded, trying to brace myself for whatever fresh disaster was coming my way. She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Richard, he's not just angry because he caught us here. He's angry because he thinks you're the reason we're separated. My jaw dropped. What? Me? Emily winced. A few months ago, he saw a text from someone named Alex on my phone. It wasn't even you. It was my cousin Alex, a woman, by the way. But Richard jumped to conclusions and assumed I was having an affair with someone from his office. I blinked. Hard. Wait. So, he already thought I was sleeping with his wife before tonight? She nodded. And now, seeing us here together? In his mind, this confirms it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, trying not to have an out-of-body experience. The universe had apparently decided to write me into a sitcom episode. Except no one was laughing. So, what happens tomorrow? I asked, already dreading the answer. Emily sighed. I don't know. Richard's pride is his weak spot. If he feels humiliated, he lashes out. Just be careful, okay? The bartender dropped off our check, and for once, I was thrilled to see a bill. Emily offered to split it, but I insisted on paying. I figured it was the least I could do, considering my career was probably about to implode. We said our awkward goodbyes outside the bar. No hug, no handshake, just an understanding nod and a good luck from Emily before she walked away into the night. As I stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the glowing city lights, one thought looped in my head. Tomorrow is going to be the worst day of my life. And I wasn't wrong. The next morning, I walked into the office like a man heading to the gallows. I barely slept. My shirt was wrinkled despite my half-hearted attempt at ironing it, and I was pretty sure I had stress-induced heartburn. As soon as I stepped off the elevator, I saw Richard's office door was wide open, a rare and ominous sight. His assistant gave me a pitying look as she pointed at the door. Good luck, she whispered. I stepped inside, and Richard was already seated behind his massive mahogany desk, staring at me like I'd personally burned down his summer home. Close the door, Alex. I did as I was told and sat down. My palms were sweating so badly I could have watered a houseplant. Alex, he began, his voice sharp and steady. Do you know how it feels to see your employee sitting across from your wife in a bar, laughing over drinks like it's some rom-com? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I felt like a middle schooler caught trying to change his grade in the system. Let me stop you right there, he said, holding up a hand. Emily explained everything to me last night. Oh, thank God. She told me about the separation, about how Greg set you two up and, most importantly, that this was all just an unfortunate coincidence. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in 12 hours. But let me be very clear, Alex, he continued, his voice dropping an octave. You are dangerously close to being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Do you understand me? I nodded so aggressively I might have given myself whiplash. For a long moment, Richard just stared at me. Then he sighed and leaned back in his chair. Take today off. Go home. Clear your head. And, Alex? Yes, sir. Stay away from Emily. Yes, sir. I practically sprinted out of his office. out of the building, and into the fresh air of freedom. I didn't stop walking until I was several blocks away, at a random coffee shop, breathing into my latte like it was an oxygen tank. Emily texted me later that day. "Everything okay? I hope Richard wasn't too hard on you." I replied, "I think I aged 10 years, but I survived. Take care, Emily." And that was it. I haven't spoken to Emily since. Richard and I have a polite, professional relationship, though every once in a while, he gives me a look during meetings that makes me sweat just a little. The moral of the story? Never, ever, agree to a blind date without asking a lot of follow-up questions first. What would you do in a similar situation? Share your opinion in the comments.